Good morning, everyone. Good evening, depending where you are. I'm Marty Murray. As you probably know, I'm Chief Curriculum and Content Architect with Target Test Prep.
Forget expensive solar panels. Get
today,
solar and a Powerwall.
Sorry.
Can you get paid $2,500 to get Tesla?
Somehow, I got my chat on the left over here, and it started playing a video for me. So anyway, as I was saying, I'm Chief Curriculum and Content Architect for Target Test Prep. I do a lot of work with Verbal. Really, my job is to figure out what people need to learn to really master GMAT Verbal, and then present it in lessons that work for everybody. So today, we're going to focus on reading comprehension. And the idea is we're going to build a foundation here for getting every reading comprehension question correct when you're taking the GMAT. So let's begin. Okay, so the idea is, how do we hit 100% accuracy or close to it on reading comprehension? And the first thing we'll talk about is some of these myths that keep us from doing well in reading comprehension as we could, because we don't have our mind in the right place. So let's start off by getting the right mindset here to master reading comprehension. And the first thing we all have to understand, the first myth that we have to dispense with, is that reading comprehension can't be improved because reading ability is fixed. The truth is, we can absolutely improve our reading comprehension skills and our reading comprehension scores, okay? And here's the deal. You know, I mean, I felt sort of the same way when I started working on reading comprehension, that there's nothing I could do, that this is basically...
Hi Marty, sorry to interject. Have you shared your presentation?
I thought I had.
No,
have I not?
No, not yet.
Oh, I can see the screen now. I appreciate that. Well, this is going well.
Go to share option and go with share screen.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I appreciate it. Little rush this morning, had a technical issue, and it's really now we're all just catching up. Okay, so as I was saying, we have some myths, and the first myth is that our reading comprehension performance can't be improved because reading ability is fixed. The truth is, we can absolutely improve our reading comprehension scores. I mean, you know, people say, well, sentence correction is the easiest one to improve. Critical reasoning is probably next easiest, and reading comprehension is the hardest. It's really not true. You can definitely improve your reading skills, and you can definitely improve your reading comprehension performance. Okay, the next myth, and this is a huge one, that there is nothing specific that we can learn in order to master reading comprehension, right? Nothing specific. So we just need to keep practicing, like do a million passages. You know, once again, everyone knows we can learn rules for sentence correction, right? And we can learn question types and argument parts for critical reasoning. But people think there's nothing to learn for reading comprehension. So therefore, just practice, you know, read a bunch of passages, read The Economist, read the Wall Street Journal. The truth is that the reality is that there's a lot we can learn. There's so many things we can learn, and the cool part is when each one of these things is almost like as good as sentence correction, where we can learn a rule and immediately do better. The truth is the same thing for reading comp. We can learn conceptual knowledge. We can learn strategies, right? So once you have conceptual knowledge and strategies, you have the foundational basics to get these things right much more than you would have. You know, for instance, if you know how certain words work in a passage, or how key sentences add up to indicate the primary purpose, that kind of conceptual knowledge is going to help so much. And then here's the other thing. Solid strategies make a huge difference. If you're having trouble with reading comprehension and you learn some solid strategies, I mean, it makes all the difference. I've even noticed this. My reading comprehension, as I'm putting together these strategies and assembling the strategies and articulating the strategies for the course, has just gotten better all the way through it because I'm so clear on my strategies now. Whereas a lot of the time before, sure, I had some strategies, but you know, we all sort of muddled through these reading comprehension questions without a clear strategy, and that holds our score down. Finally, we can develop skills, right? I mean, and how do we do that? With practice, with learning to apply the strategies. We can develop our reading comprehension skills. So this is the thing about RC is these myths that say like we can't do anything about it. It's not like sentence correction where you can learn a lot of rules. I've discovered that this really isn't true. We can absolutely learn things that are going to make a difference. The next myth is that reading comprehension passages are too hard to understand in the time allowed. So we have to, gimmick our way through these things. And here are just some of the gimmicks I've seen. Reading only the first and last sentences of each paragraph of a passage. Well, that's great. I mean, honestly, you can pick a few things up by reading the first and last sentences. But are you really going to understand the passage if you do that? Are you really going to be prepared to answer questions if you do that? Not so well. You're going to know some of the basic ideas of the passage. Reading only keywords in the passage. I've seen a lot of people do this. I mean, we all learn about, okay, however is a keyword that shows that there's a contrast, and that's often important in a reading comprehension passage. However, learning just that however is important doesn't mean we should focus on only these keywords. And people do this a lot. I've seen people that are perfectly capable of scoring super high in reading comprehension, but they get the idea that they should be focusing on these keywords to the exclusion of everything else. And it's painful to watch what the answer choices are choosing when they could be getting the questions 100% correct. Another gimmick is doing something like eliminating all extreme answer choices. The choices to say all or every or any. Wait a minute, that can't be right. It can't be right that every time it's true or all of the time it's true, right? The truth of the matter is sometimes an extreme answer choice is correct and sometimes it's not. Now, some might say, well, more of the time, an extreme answer choice is incorrect. And that may be true. But here's the thing. The fact that it's incorrect more of the time doesn't mean it's incorrect all the time. So you're basically rolling the dice if you eliminate extreme answer choices without reading the entire passage and really understanding it. And another one is selecting choices because they use words that match words in the passage, right? Oh, look, this word matches the passage. I should choose it. Sometimes, yeah, the words in the choice that match the words in the passage indicate that it's correct. But a lot of the time, what do? They see you coming. So they write the incorrect choices to match words in the passage. And they write the correct answers to not match the words in the passage. So if you're selecting choices because they use words that match words in the passage, there's a good chance you're going to get these incorrect. Finally, so what's the reality here? The reality is that the gimmicks are not reliable and do not help us to answer the hard questions we need to get to get our goal scores. The only thing that works is truly reading and understanding the passage, okay? So don't try to gimmick your way. I mean, if you want to score, and get, okay, a low score in RC, you don't really care, you're focused on quant, or, fine, use gimmicks. That'll get you up to a point. But what I've seen is the gimmicks really, they either get you up to kind of an average verbal score, or if you would score, I've seen someone use the gimmicks and drag her verbal score from the 40s to the 30s. And then we had to, go over what she was doing, see that she was using all these gimmicks, and go, wait a minute, maybe you just unlearn all these gimmicks and start reading the passages and understanding what's going on. You'll drive your score back up. And sure enough, she ended up scoring in the 40s in verbal just by not doing the gimmicks anymore. So this is huge. Got to know the difference between gimmicks and really, really focusing and understanding the passage. Okay, so let's move on. So what does reading comprehension test? Well, of all things, it really does test how well we comprehend what we read. I mean, and if you look at these questions and think about what they're asking, a lot of the time, it really comes down to, did you really understand what you read? Okay. So this is good information for us, because when we're practicing reading comprehension, if we're not getting questions right, one of the questions we can ask ourselves is, did I really understand what I read? Or was I focused on keywords and reading the first sentence, or maybe overly focused on details, trying to remember the passage, or taking a whole lot of notes? All that stuff is going to kill you if it keeps you from comprehending what you read. So it's so key. Just understanding the passage is key. So when you're practicing reading comprehension, keep in mind, I have to understand what I'm reading. The second thing is how well we notice details, okay? And details are huge. Now, here's the thing. We're not going to focus on details too much when we're reading a passage, because, we can't overly focus on the details, because then we may not comprehend what we read. But we do need to notice details, especially when we go back to answer the questions, right? Do you really notice the details, or are you glossing them over? That's another thing that reading comprehension is testing, which one of those you're doing. Finally, it's testing us in how well we pick up on the implications of what we read. So, this is kind of like the critical reasoning type stuff. Do you understand what it all adds up to? So there's, if you, some of the questions that you see on your ESR, it has two sections. One is stated information, and the other one is the information that's implied. So we have to work on both of these. We have to work on both noticing the details and figuring out also what the implications are. So these are two key aspects of preparing for reading comprehension to get all the questions correct. Okay, let's move on. So reading comprehension success comes down to four things. This is what it adds up to. We have to, first of all, understand passages. I mean, we just talked about that, but this is key. So if you want to know the four main things to work on, like if you're trying to drive up your reading comprehension score, or if you're wondering why it's not going up, if you work on these four things, this is going to take you to your score goal. So yes, the first one is definitely understanding passages. Okay. We have to understand the passages, as we just discussed. The second one is understanding the questions. And you know what? This takes a lot less time than understanding a passage, but it also, if you don't do it, can mess you up just as badly as not understanding the passage, right? So after we read a reading comprehension passage, our next step is to read the question. And this is a huge step. I've seen people miss them just because they didn't read the entire question, didn't understand the question, didn't really bother to pick up on the details of what the question was asking. So yeah, this is a huge, even though the question is only a couple lines long, understanding the questions is a huge part of reading comprehension success. Okay, a next skill that we need is the ability to find in the passages the right information for answering the questions. Okay, and this is big too. So yeah, we have to understand the passage and then understand the question, but also we have to develop skill in finding the right information in the passages. And we're going to illustrate this in a minute going through a passage. But finding this information is, okay, if you understand the passage, but you can't find the information you need to answer the question, you're not going to get that question correct. So we have to learn, okay, the question's asking about, I don't know, mountains in Colorado. We need to find that information in the passage. It's going to be so key. And if you're good at finding the right information in the passage, this is going to drive your score up. The better you are at this, the higher your score is going to be. And finally, we have to be able to tell trap choices from correct answers. And you know what? We can do all these other three. We can understand the passage, we can understand the question, we can find the right information. But if we get fooled by trap choices, then we're not going to hit our score goals, right? So we have to be able to tell trap choices, and reading comprehension is all about trap choices versus correct answers. Okay, and we're going to see that also as we go through a couple questions now. So, okay, we're going to go through some questions, and we have to remember, number one is understand the passage. Number two, make sure you understand what the question is asking, right? Like, I don't know, it could be a little complex or twisted or convoluted, What is it asking? Don't jump to the answer choices until you understand the question. Third of all, go through the passage and really find the right information for answering the question. And here's the thing, the answer choices will compare well with the information in the passage, right? So we are comparing the answer choice with the information. So if we find the right information, we can always compare the answer choices. And by the way, if that information doesn't match the answer choice, it's one of these trap choices, right? So these are our four main things we're going to do as we hit a couple questions now. So let's hit this passage. Take your time with it and remember our four things. You have to understand the passage. We have to understand the question, what we have to do to answer the question. We have to find the information, the right information in the passage that helps us answer the question. And finally, we have to focus on not getting trapped, because we're going to see here there's a few different kinds of traps they throw at us, and we can't afford to get trapped. I'll give you a couple minutes on this, and then we'll move on. Okay. Have any answers? Anybody have a guess? What do you think the primary purpose of this passage is? And it's a little tricky. Okay. So we have some answers. Let's hit this passage. Now here's what we need to do for this question. We read the passage first. Okay. And a lot of people wonder, well, should I read the passage first or the question first? Part of our goal, or part of our strategy to hitting our goal score with reading comprehension is to read the passage first. Because if you read the question first, you're going to be all distracted by the question when you're reading the passage, and you won't pick up on everything you need to pick up on when you're reading the passage. Remember, one of the key things here is understand the passage. If we're all focused on what the primary purpose is when we're reading the passage, okay, there's a good chance we might not notice all these little details in here somewhere. Okay, is this the primary purpose? I don't know, all this stuff. So we want to really make sure we read the passage first and then the question. So let's start by reading this passage. In addition to conventional galaxies, the universe contains very dim galaxies that until recently went unnoticed by astronomers. Okay, now normally the first sentence of the passage is key. Okay, so let's notice the sentence. The universe, in addition to conventional galaxies, the universe contains very dim galaxies until recently. Okay, this is interesting, went unnoticed. Possibly as numerous as conventional galaxies, these galaxies have the same general shape and even the same approximate number of stars as a common type of conventional galaxy, the spiral, but tend to be larger. Okay, so we have some comparisons here, right? This is the kind of stuff we need to notice. They have the same general shape and the same approximate number of stars, but tend to be larger. Because these galaxies' mass is spread out over larger areas, they have fewer stars per unit volume than do conventional galaxies. So all these details. Apparently, these low surface brightness galaxies, as they are called, take much longer than conventional galaxies to condense their primordial gas and convert it to stars. That is, they evolve much more slowly. Okay. So we got the general idea here so far, right? We're understanding the passage. This first paragraph is about these dim galaxies that until recently went unnoticed. And it gives some details about the fact that they're dim and that they're spread out. They have fewer stars per unit volume. Okay, great. Okay, now, second paragraph. And normally, the first sentence of a paragraph is a really key sentence. So let's make sure, as we're reading the second paragraph, the first sentence is going to be important. These galaxies may constitute an answer to the long-standing puzzle of missing baryonic mass in the universe. So they may constitute an answer. Baryon subatomic particles that are generally protons or neutrons are the source of stellar and therefore galactic luminosity. And so their numbers can be estimated based on how luminous galaxies are. However, the amount of helium in the universe, as measured by spectroscopy, suggests that there are far more baryons in the universe than estimates based on galactic luminosity indicate. Astronomers have long speculated that the missing baryonic mass might eventually be discovered in intergalactic space or some large population of galaxies that are difficult to detect. Okay, cool. So now this entire paragraph, if you think about it, the second paragraph is really all about this idea here, right? These galaxies may constitute an answer, and then it gives, from the rest of the paragraph, gives us these details about how it may constitute an answer. They're the source of luminosity. The amount of helium in the universe suggests they're far more numerous. So basically, the astronomers have speculated that maybe this baryon mass will be discovered somewhere else, and it might be in these less luminous galaxies. Okay, cool. So we understand the passage, and we picked up on some of the main ideas. So now is when we go to the question. Right? We read the passage first, question second. The primary purpose of the passage is to. Okay, cool. So what do we say? We're going to understand the passage, which we do. We understand the question, which is key. We're going to find the right information in the passage to answer the question, and we're going to make sure we don't pick trap answers. We have to tell the difference between correct answers and trap choices. So let's do that here. Since it's asking us the primary purpose, the right information in the passage is not necessarily in one spot, or it's not like a detailed question where we're looking in one spot for keywords. It's really the things we found already as we were reading the passage. So the right information is what? Well, there's two main ideas we saw. One is this first one, that in addition to conventional galaxies, the universe contains these dim galaxies. Okay, so that would be part of it. We can tell that this whole paragraph is about these dim galaxies and some of their characteristics. So the primary purpose is somehow going to be based on this one key idea. The second paragraph starts with these galaxies may constitute an answer to the long-standing puzzle of the missing baryonic mass. Okay, so notice the second paragraph is really all about, as we said, what this first statement says. It's really just expanding on that first statement. So the primary purpose is basically, seems to be to introduce these galaxies and then introduce an idea about the galaxies. So that's the information we need. And if we hang on to that, it keeps the primary purpose nice and focused for us so we can't get fooled into choosing one of these trap choices. Okay. So now let's go through the choices, starting with A. Identify a newly discovered phenomenon and explain its origins. You know, people do choose this choice. So let's figure this out. It says identify a phenomenon. Well, okay. I guess we could call these galaxies a phenomenon. Okay, but the question, looking at this, is there anything in the passage, right? We have to compare these choices with the passage. So we're going to ask ourselves, is there anything in the passage that says that this is a newly discovered phenomenon? And there is. Look, it says these to conventional galaxies, the universe contains very dim galaxies that until recently went unnoticed. So it's fairly new phenomenon. Okay, cool. So far this choice looks great. But here's the thing. We have to be careful about, as we said, telling the difference between trap choices and correct answers. And you know what? If we cut this choice in half, we see something interesting. If we only read the first part, identify a newly discovered phenomenon, it basically seems correct, although I don't see the passage really identifying. So this is a red flag. This might be incorrect. But you know what? Let's keep reading this choice and explain its origins. Does it ever say here that it explains the origins, like why these galaxies exist? I don't see that. Does this second paragraph, by the way, does it explain the origins of these galaxies? No. In fact, the primary purpose is supposed to cover the entire passage, but this only matches the first half, which is, identifying the phenomenon. And then it goes on to say something about explaining origins, which doesn't match the passage. And also it leaves out this entire second part. So we just avoided a trap choice by paying attention to the difference between the choice and the passage. And you know what? If you're getting reading comprehension questions wrong, it's not that hard, right? A lot of people choose this choice, but we don't have to, because we're just going to compare everything about the choice. So number one, is it really identifying? Sketchy. Newly discovered phenomenon, for sure. Explain its origins? No. And it doesn't include the second part of the passage, which is this whole thing about the constitute an answer. Primary purpose question has to do the whole passage. Comparing this choice to the passage, we get rid of it. It's out. Gone. We're down to four. We have a 4-choice question now. Let's skip to C. Contrast two phenomena and discuss a puzzling difference between them. You know what? I do see what we could consider two phenomena. One is the galaxies themselves, as described in the first paragraph, and the other is this whole thing about the helium and all that. But does it really discuss a puzzling difference between them? I don't see it discussing a puzzling difference, right? I don't know. It depends how we look at this thing. Maybe we even consider the galaxies, the two phenomena, the two kinds of galaxies. Whatever it is, it doesn't discuss a puzzling difference. There's nothing here that is a puzzling difference between two phenomena, right? And second of all, this second paragraph is really not discussing a puzzling difference. So once again, by carefully comparing these choices, and we're going to harp on this a lot, we're just carefully comparing the choices with the passage. And by doing this, we'll get these all correct. You go from, I was talking to someone the other day, she just started doing these types of strategies and went from totally hating RC and now nailing. Okay. Compare two classes of objects and discuss the physical properties of each. Well, this one's an easy out, right? And easy outs are great for us because then they allow us to whittle down the question to just a couple answer choices. I don't see anything about two classes of objects. I don't see anything about discussing the physical properties of each. This is gone, right? It just doesn't compare. E, discuss a discovery and point out its inconsistency with existing theory. They're doing it to us again, folks. It's a trap choice, right? We cut this in half. Does the passage discuss the discovery? Absolutely. It does discuss the discovery. Recently went unnoticed. This is a discovery, these very dim galaxies. So, but our key thing is remembering that we have to sort the difference between trap choices and correct answers. And there's nothing in the passage about pointing out any inconsistency with existing theory. Right? Compare the choice with the passage. The passage talks about the galaxies. The passage talks about this baryonic mass. It does not say anything about an inconsistency with existing theory. There's no disagreement. There's no inconsistency. Just comparing the passage, this is gone. You know what? I used to be afraid of reading comprehension. I say, oh man, those are hard. I get them incorrect. I always get the critical reasonings right, but I almost, wish reading comprehension wasn't on the test. But now seeing this stuff, I feel good with reading comprehension, and you can do the same thing. We're carefully comparing. B, describe a phenomenon, consider its scientific significance. Okay, does the passage describe a phenomenon? Definitely. It introduces the very dim galaxies, and then this entire first paragraph describes them. Done. Consider its scientific significance. Well, let's look at that first sentence of the second paragraph that we is probably somehow important because it is the first sentence of the second paragraph. These galaxies may constitute an answer. Is that considering its scientific significance? Absolutely. Then, and it also says that astronomers have long speculated that the missing baryonic mass may be discovered in some large population of galaxies. Oh boy. So this is dealing with the astronomers' speculation. It's certainly this considering the scientific significance of this discovery. It's helping the astronomers answer a question. We just compared the choice with the passage. There's no way we're getting this wrong at this point. The correct answer is absolutely B. Okay. So let's continue in this, but I'm going to go through some questions here. Let's see what we have going on. Should we be doing LSAT for preparing for GMAT RC in case we want to get V40 to V41? You're better off starting off with all the GMAT passages, but yeah, you could do LSAT passages as well. Let's see if there's anything specific about this because we're going to move on to another one. Yeah, someone just said the worst part of reading comprehension is we have to read with focus and awareness. I don't know if that's the worst part. It is definitely a key part. We have to read with focus and awareness. So, but we see how well it works, right? And it wasn't also, we can parse these passages a little bit and focus on key sentences and key details to a degree. And it all starts, here's the thing, if you want to focus on the passage, like we did here, we noticed that this first sentence is really important. And we noticed that this first sentence is really important. So if you're doing things like that, and then you're noticing that all these details, what their purpose is, it's not that hard to focus on the passage because you're like, oh, this is what's going on. This is what's going on. I can do this. I can see what's going on. I'm understanding. Okay, let's go to another question. Same passage. This is a detailed question. Okay, so we have to find the right information in the passage as we know. So remember the four things. We understood the passage already. We're now going to read this question carefully. It's our second main thing that's going to be the foundation of our RC score. The third thing is finding the right information in the passage. And since this is a detailed question, we're going to have to find the exact right information in the passage, which is, that's going to be the foundation of getting this one correct. And finally, we have to be careful of those trap choices and carefully tell the difference between trap choices and correct answers by comparing what the passage says with what the answer choice says. And if we carefully compare what the answer choice says with what the passage says, we're going to get this correct. So just hold off on putting up your answers for a second. Let everybody give it a shot and see what you think. I don't know what to do about that logo that's hiding part of the question, but I'll read the question in a second. In case you can't see, in case anybody's wondering, the question is, the author mentions the fact that baryons are the source of stars' luminosity, primarily in order to explain. That's the entire question. I wonder if I can. The question, once again, for those of you who can't see it, says the author mentions the fact that baryons are the source of stars' luminosity in order to explain. So in order to explain something, why does the author mention the baryons being a source of stars' luminosity? What's the author trying to explain? Tricky question. And remember to compare that passage and the choice you're thinking to choose. Okay, let's go through this. Okay, so we understood the passage. Let's understand the question, even though the logo's covering a little bit of it. The author mentions the fact that baryons are the source of stars' luminosity, primarily in order to explain what? Right? So there's something that the author is looking to explain by mentioning that baryons are the source of the star's luminosity. Okay. So how do we do this? Well, we need to find the right information in the passage. And to find the right information in the passage, one of the moves we can make is to use keywords in the question stem. Now, this baryons is mentioned a lot, but a great keyword to use here would be luminosity, right? Because it doesn't actually, I'm sorry, luminosity is also mentioned a lot, but we do have a combination of baryons and luminosity. So what we're going to really have to do here is find where it discusses these two together. Now, one of the key things we do as we read the passages, we have to kind of remember what is where. So when we're reading a passage, we have a couple of goals in mind. One is we do consider what these key points are, as we did. And another is that we have to kind of remember where everything is. So this is talking about unnoticed by astronomers up here. Here's some details on these galaxies. And then down here is where all the stuff with baryons. In the second paragraph is all the stuff about the baryons, right? So we remember where that is. We're going to home in on the second paragraph. So now within the second paragraph, I see luminosity a couple of times. So let's look here. Just start reading down from the top. These galaxies may constitute an answer. It's a long-standing puzzle, the missing baryonic mass in the universe. Okay. Baryons, some atomic particles that are generally protons or neutrons, are the source of stellar and therefore galactic luminosity. And so their numbers can be estimated based on how luminous galaxies are. Right? So the numbers can be estimated based on how luminous galaxies are. So that's interesting. So that's our information where luminosity and baryons are mentioned together. There's a little bit more down here. The amount of helium in the universe is measured by spectroscopy, suggests that there are more baryons in the universe than estimates based on galactic luminosity indicate. Okay, so one of those two is going to help us answer this question. Let's start with choice E. How is drawn? So the author mentioned the fact that baryons are the source of stars' luminosity in order to explain how astronomers know bright galaxies contain more baryons than do dim galaxies. This is beautiful. I'm glad we started with E because why? It's an easy out. And part of getting these questions all correct is getting rid of our easy out. Anywhere does it say that this is how astronomers know that bright galaxies contain more baryons than dim galaxies? Look for it. I see baryons. I see missing baryonic mass. Does it say anywhere more bright galaxies contain more baryons? I don't see one word about bright galaxies in this entire paragraph. Right? This is gone. See what we're doing? We're carefully comparing these choices with the passage. And, you know, gosh, that wasn't too hard to get rid of. Maybe we're going to get this one correct too. Okay, D. Why astronomers' estimates of baryonic mass based on galactic luminosity are more reliable than those based on spectroscopic studies of helium? It does mention spectroscopic studies of helium. But does it suggest that this is why? Let's check. Why astronomers' estimates of baryonic mass are more reliable? Let's take a look about the ones about, find this helium. So we can look for something in the answer choice in the passage. However, the amount of helium suggests that there are far more baryons in the universe than estimates based on galactic luminosity indicate. Wait a second. This is sort of saying that the galactic luminosity is less reliable than helium. So yeah, you know what we can't do here? We can't get fooled into choosing a choice that says the opposite of what the passage says. Notice what could happen here. We have it does have matching words. It does match. It does say something about helium. It also compares that there are more. I see the word more here, so these words match great. But we have to read for comprehension to get these 100% correct. And what it says is the helium in the universe suggests that there are more baryons than estimates based on galactic luminosity indicate. So it's kind of saying that the helium studies are more reliable, not the other ones are more reliable, because then if we read to understand, astronomers have long speculated the missing baryonic mass. So they're implying that the helium estimate is more reliable. Compare with the passage, read for understanding, get it correct. Okay, C. Why astronomers can use galactic luminosity to estimate baryonic mass? So we want to explain why. Something. Does it explain why? It sort of seems to. I'm going to keep C for now. How about B? How astronomers are able to calculate the total luminosity of a galaxy? Okay, going through. Do we see anything about calculating total luminosity in this paragraph about baryons? Notice there's nothing there. And yet this does seem, a lot of people choose this choice, how astronomers are able to calculate the total luminosity. But let's look through this. These galaxies may constitute an answer to the long-standing puzzle of missing baryonic mass. The particles are generally protons and neutrons, and so their numbers can be estimated based on how luminous galaxies are. So they're actually using the luminosity to calculate the baryons, not the baryons to calculate the luminosity. So you know what? Even though this word, once again, we have word matching. So we have to understand what the passage says, right? And it does not say that they're calculating the total luminosity of galaxy. In fact, all we had to do is check. Right? Going back to the passage works every time. Okay. A, how astronomers determine that some galaxies contain fewer stars per unit volume than do others? Let's take a look. How astronomers can determine contains fewer stars per unit volume. Does it say anything about baryons with determining that these have less unit volume? It doesn't, right? We just carefully compare. Once again, reading from top to bottom, these galaxies may constitute an answer. Baryon particles are generally protons and neutrons, and their numbers can be estimated. The amount of helium in the universe is saying something else. And finally, astronomers have long speculated the baryonic mass might be discovered. Does it say anything about calculating the total luminosity of a galaxy? No. I mean, I'm sorry, does it say anything about determining that some galaxies contain fewer stars per unit volume? No, it doesn't say anything about that. So this has nothing to do with the baryons. And you know what? This is a pretty hard question. A lot of people get it incorrect. And notice how just by being careful and really understanding what this paragraph says, this choice A is gone. Honestly, this is only the second time I've seen this question, and I don't have the correct answer in front of me, so I was a little bit wondering. So I'm right here with you. And definitely we're down to one choice. Why astronomers can use galactic luminosity to estimate baryonic mass. Okay, let's go through here. We saw luminosity in the middle here. Baryons, subatomic particles that are generally protons or neutrons, are a source of galactic luminosity, and so their numbers can be estimated based on how luminous galaxies are. And so their numbers can be estimated because they're the source of luminosity. So absolutely, the reason that the author mentioned is to say that this is why their numbers can be estimated based on how luminous galaxies are. All right, they can use galactic luminosity to estimate it because they are the source of luminosity. So C is absolutely correct. That's how it gets done. That's how you get 100% of these correct. By being super careful and just matching the choices to the passage one by one. So what did? We read the passage first, we read the question second, we were super careful to find the right information, and we really had to be super careful also to avoid these trap choices. Let's wrap up with some ideas. To develop strong reading comprehension skills, we're going to do these 5 things. We're going to practice on time. If you've been watching any of my webinars, you use a TTP course, or you use the reading comprehension part of the course, or the critical reasoning, whatever it is, we hammer this point over and over. Practice on time. You notice we've only done a couple of questions here, and they took us a little while to go through every choice. And you know what? I've seen people spend a half an hour or even 2 hours on one practice question. You know what? That works great. Practice on time, because by practicing on time, you give yourself time to develop skills. And I tell you what, you're going to do much better if you take 20 minutes on your questions, each one, or whatever it is, 10 minutes, okay, and get them correct, and then work on bringing the time down, then you will if you answer them all in under 2 minutes, and then you try and you get a lot incorrect, and you try to figure out how to get them right. It's how you're going to figure out how to get them right in 2 minutes each. How are you going to practice? You're not. Practice on time, but I don't care what anybody says. I know there's boot camp, GMAT boot camps out there where they have a stopwatch. Say, okay, you all have 2 minutes to answer this question. You know, yeah, they do that. And I've also talked to, I don't know, I talk to someone practically every day who says, I'm having trouble getting my verbal score to go up. And I go, how much time do you spend per question? And they say, well, between 1 minute and 30 seconds, 2 minutes. I say, how are you going to learn to do something in 1 minute and 30 seconds? Okay, practice on time. The second one, analyze every choice. Okay, you saw what we did. We carefully analyzed every choice. We didn't just go through and look for the best answer and and kind of vaguely go through the rest. We didn't look for extreme choices or just easy ways to get rid of the choices. We actually analyzed every choice and compared it with the passage. If you do this consistently, you're going to get these right. Okay, and if you're not getting them right, say to yourself, am I really analyzing every choice, or am I just, just vaguely looking at some? I don't like the way this one looks. It doesn't seem to match the passage. The words don't match. It has an extreme word in it. Am I really analyzing the choices, or am I just doing some vague stuff? If the answer is that you're doing vague things, to get your reading score basically perfect, analyze every choice carefully. And you know what? That's why you have to practice on time, right? Because in order to analyze every choice, you need time. Okay, third, choose an answer. When you're, I'm not saying, and actually this goes for the test too, but really when you're practicing, choose an answer when you're close to 100% certain. Okay? Why would you do it before that? Why would you guess? Why would you get it wrong? I'm going to guess now, I'm down to 2 choices. Don't do it. Or I like this one a little better. You're practicing. Practice going through the motions that lead to success. We're trying to develop skills, right? If you want to develop skills, then develop skills in choosing an answer when you're sure. And you know what? You need to learn to be sure. And if you're saying, well, I'm not sure, well, that's what you're learning how to do, right? So give you the self-time. Figure out how to be sure. You saw what we did. If you understand the passage, you understand the question, all those steps, you know, and you do them well, you're going to be sure. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're going to choose an answer when we're close to 100% certain. And here's the thing. This whole thing, we're focusing on process, okay? And it's really freaking on me. Well, I'm not going to circle focusing on process, okay? We're focusing on process. So our game is not, you know, if you're like, oh, I got it right. Okay, great. Well, what was your process? Well, you know, I went through a couple choices I didn't really like them, and then I guess between the last two and I got it right. Well, that's not the process. The process is, you know, carefully analyzing every choice, understanding the question, understanding the passage, and really nailing this thing down so you're close to 100% certain of your choice. That's the process we want to focus on, okay? So focus on process when you're practicing to develop skill. That's your key thing here. And yes, the goal, the last point here, is that the goal is development of skill. So that's why we do these things. Our goal is not to answer 50 questions a day, not even close. I've seen people rock GMAT Verbal doing 10 questions or even 8 questions a day because they did all this stuff. Okay, the goal is not to answer questions quickly. The goal, you know, it's almost not even just to get questions correct, because if you get them correct but you haven't developed skill, you're not really doing anything yet. The goal is development of skill. And keep that in mind when you're doing this. Am I developing skill, or am I just going through passages and questions to see what happens? And if you develop skill and you're really focused on that, you're going to nail reading comprehension. Okay, so with that, let's go through some of your questions. Let's see what's going on. Okay, someone asked, how long should you spend on each passage? On the short passages, maybe 2 to 3 minutes. On the long passages, 3 to 4 minutes. Sometimes it's hard to tell what's short or long because there can be short passages with 2 paragraphs and long passages with 2 paragraphs, and there can be, you know, long passages with 4 paragraphs. So you kind of have to eyeball it and tell, but basically around 2 to 3 minutes on the short ones and 3 to 4 minutes on the long ones. After reading the whole passage, do we have to summarize it? Yeah, I mean, it definitely helps to kind of summarize it in your mind. You don't necessarily have to take notes on it, especially if you're answering a primary purpose question. You're going to summarize the passage. You know, after you read the question stem, go, okay, I have to summarize this passage. I'm going to go too crazy summarizing it, but you do want to say, did I understand what this said? And the key thing is, the cool thing is, these passages tend to have some kind of simple story to them. I mean, you read the thing and like, gosh, it said all this information, but you know, like this passage we just did, it had a simple story to it. It really was just saying, all these details were really just saying that there's these kinds of galaxies, and they constitute an answer to this long-standing puzzle of the missing baryonic mass. It wasn't that crazy, even though when you're reading it, like, oh man, what is all this stuff? So yeah, you can kind of summarize in your mind and make sure you understand it. I'm planning to do 30 questions of each type for a month. You mean each time for a day? Each day for a month? Yeah, 30 questions a day for verbal is probably too many. It's a lot. You know, obviously, if you're spending out, 6 hours a day, then maybe 30 questions would make sense. A lot of times I see people do like 5 questions in an hour. So 30 questions would be 6 hours of verbal alone, you know? I mean, it depends how good you are at them, but 30 questions a day, you're also probably burning through the questions too fast. You're going to use up all your questions and go, should I be using LSAT questions? Should I be using GRE questions? You know, take your time. Don't use all the questions up right away. Don't burn through them doing 30 a day. You know, there are not that many out there. Just take your time and use them for all they're worth. Could we go over E on the last question? How astronomers, you know, this is fine, we'll do that. E, how astronomers know bright galaxies contain more baryons than dim galaxies? They mention the fact that baryons are source of stars' luminosity because we're trying to know that bright galaxies contain more baryons. Where does it say in the second paragraph that the bright galaxies contain more baryons? It doesn't say anything about that. The only thing it says about these, the difference is they have fewer stars per unit volume up here. You know, they have fewer stars per unit volume. Oh, I know why I keep switching on me, because I got rid of the pen. Okay, fewer stars per unit volume. It doesn't say they have more baryons than dim galaxies. So there's no way E is correct, because it says nothing about these bright galaxies having more baryons. In fact, we don't even know that they do. Okay. It's yeah, the author does imply that the spectroscopy is more accurate. Let's see what else is going on. Because we only have a couple minutes here. Yeah, Grace is saying space passage is usually pretty hard. Yeah, okay. These questions are high 600, low 700 level difficulty. Let's see if there are any other key questions here real quick. Someone was asking how to speed up in verbal. I wrote a whole post on that, but basically, number one, skill gets you faster. The more skilled you are, the faster you're going to be. The second thing is you work on efficiency. So once you're skilled at getting questions correct, figure out how to get them correct faster. The third thing is don't try not to take as many notes. A lot of people slow themselves down with notes. You know, so if you're taking a million notes, that really can suck up a lot of time. So those, and the fourth thing really is be more careful, because care comes with speed, and verbal comes with care. If you're careful, then you're not circling through the choices, because you immediately see, well, this is wrong. You know, and you're not going, okay, is it A, then B? You're being, because if you understand the passage and you're carefully reading the choices and you're carefully comparing them, you're going to eliminate them the first time through and go through the question faster. So those four things: become skilled, okay? Don't take too many notes. Look for ways to be efficient and be super careful. And also, I wrote a whole blog post on this, how to get faster in GMAT Verbal. If you look up how to get faster in GMAT Verbal, Target Test Prep blog, you'll find the blog post on that. I think we're about out of time. And that's pretty much it anyway for questions. So generally, okay, let's review this and then we'll talk about how to improve your verbal score. Remember this: when you're working on reading comprehension, you're working on these four things: understanding the passages, understanding the questions, finding the right information, and telling your choices from trap answers, telling trap choices from correct answers. If you work on those four things, your reading comprehension score is going to go up the better you get at those four things. Okay, it's going to keep going up. As far as verbal in general goes, really all the stuff we're talking about here, and most of it, applies to verbal overall. Okay, if you take your time practicing and you and you go through the questions, you analyze the choices carefully, all the stuff we talked about here, no matter what kind, this all applies to all kinds of verbal questions, okay? These things about practicing on time, analyzing every choice, choosing answers only when you're certain, focusing on process, all that stuff applies to all kinds of verbal questions. So if you're having trouble with verbal, do those things. And also, do your stuff with learning the concepts, learning your strategies. Every type of verbal question, if you learn concepts, learn strategies, and develop skill, you'll see your score going up. And it takes time. You know, it's a game. It's you're learning to solve these tricky little puzzles. It takes time to learn how to do that. And you know, you can definitely do it. A lot of people start off low and end up scoring high, and you can do it too. So that's it for today, folks. Thanks a lot. It's been fun. Always good to get out here and be able to talk about this stuff with you. Have a good weekend.